Hello everybody, I'm Conquering History Games, and welcome to a new Minor Monday. This is Minor Monday number 52, where we're going to be going over Korea. And once again, it says minor, but I'm sure you just have to look at how long this video is, and you'll see that it's not so minor at all. I just want to do a really quick shout out to Adrian von Ziegler and his new, relatively new 1 hour of Japanese fantasy music, which we're listening to, because I couldn't find non-copyright Korean music that didn't have singing. Yeah, shout out to him. I'll link it in the description. Wish I'd had this before when I was doing one of my more recent Asian campaigns. Anyway, another thing, there was a comment on report number 51 that they kind of wish that I would go a little bit quicker, or make the videos shorter. That'll probably come with time, in the sense that I'll probably learn to get the information out quickly instead of talking for like 2 minutes at the start like I am now. But at the same time, I like to think of these videos as an addendum to the reports, as I think it would be really great if people who read the reports then also watch these videos on it, because I'm going to be going into the I'll give a little bit of details of like who the leaders are, contextualize them, because you might be somebody, let's say you're, I don't know, somebody who lives in the UK, and you're seeing, Yi-un is a potential candidate to be king of Korea, and you have no idea who that is, so like why would you even care? So I just kind of contextualize things a little bit more. Anyway, let's just jump into things here. So let's talk about Korea. Korea, the concept that is being explained here by Suzua, is a nation. It's going to be a nation that's going to show up in Kaiserreich version 0.21. The concept is that it'll only show up as a puppet tag. That means there's going to be no more Korean revolts for when you're playing as Japan. Though pending a rework, there is a rework coming. And instead, Korea is going to be similar to Scotland and Wales, where the only way it gets made is if somebody conquers the area and then manually creates a puppet regime during the peace treaty, and then whatever is the politics of the nation that did it, that's going to determine the politics of Korea. But there's a pretty decent amount of flavor here in the various political parties. And going to be a lot of new advisors. There's going to be new portraits and things like that. So, the background for this Korean Kaiserreich is that Korean independence is functionally at an end when it gets annexed by Japan in 1910. But then 1925 happens with like all the things, the May 30th movement, British Empire is collapsing. There's all this scrambling for power. A provisional government for the Republic of Korea is going to be established in Shanghai, and then in 1928 they're going to petition the Americans for political support for independence. It's going to be a very interesting collaboration we're going to see when I'm talking about some of the leaders for Korea between America and Korea, like that, what sort of relationship they had there. Anyway, it doesn't work, and so the Koreans instead, because the United States rejected them, turned to Japan, to Germany, to deal with them. So the Germans are going to be giving support to the Koreans. Most importantly, not doing anything about the Korean, I guess we could call it a government in exile that exists in Shanghai. And then there's going to be some tie-ins between the Koreans and the L-KMT. Alright, so there are going to be Korean generals in exile, you can see here. This is, from what I'm getting reading this, is I think that this is going to kind of be how, like, if Zhukov and Tukhachevsky and stuff are fighting in Patagonia in South America at the beginning of the Kaiserreich game, and then later on they could leave. That's what I think is going on with these Korean generals here. That they're like going to eventually make their way back home. So the starting situation for excuse me, let me drink a little water here. Starting situation for Korea, we got 4 national spirits. And a lot of other things to go over. Number 1, the low literacy rate. You know, anybody who's played a Griffonian nation in Equestria War knows what this is about. But yeah, bad literacy rate is going to hurt your research speed by a whole 30%. You're dealing with a scarred nation because presumably there was war, just like with Scotland. Scotland's only going to be released via war, so presumably the war has also affected Korea. This is going to hurt your recruitable population factor. 25% additional consumer goods hurts your stability, hurts your max factories, hurts your construction speed. Number 3, there is still a social hierarchy that exists in the population. It's kind of a leftover of the Joseon dynasty, so that's going to hurt your stability and war support. Number 4, national spirit. Finally, we've got political violence. Well, you know, it's pretty self-explanatory, isn't it? Hurting your political power gain by minus 35%. Up here, this guy, the leader, in the case of the authoritarian Democrats, which was probably the Germans, in charge here. Political embodiment of what remains of Korean nationalism, a puppeteer behind countless cases of white terror. It says how he's part of the Tonghak movement. Rescued by An Ta-hao, father of the legendary An Ju-gun, later assassin of Aito Harumba, arrested for murdering a Japanese merchant. You know, you can pause and read this all right here. But the point is, this is a guy, he's one of the figures of Korean independence. So he's the one who's going to pop up in this situation. All right, let's now we have 4 political parties here that they want us to look at. The totalists are the Korean Workers' Party. For the people who find the radical socialist KNRP to be too moderate. These are the ones who are based out of Paris, so like presumably, and we're going to talk about their leader later, but the whole idea is that, you know, they're in tight with like the Mosleys of the world and the oh God, I'm forgetting the name of the totalist leaders in France. But yeah, part of that totalist movement that's outside of mainstream syndicalism. Speaking of mainstream, well, this is really kind of socialist minded, but you have the KNRP, which is the twin to the left Kuomintang. So there's the 3 principles of the people, except it's for Korea. And we'll talk about ties with the Kuomintang later as well. Number 8, Social Democrats Committee for the Preparation of Korean Independence. People who used to be in the KIP, you know, not very popular, as you can see here. And then number 9, the Authoritarian Democrats, the Korean Independence Party, led by Kim Koo, who we just talked about up here. And so when they get released, this is the tree that you're going to have. So it looks mostly pretty straightforward. I'm saying things here like, you know, reconstruction efforts, industrialization, salvaging things. Like, this is probably going to be the stuff that's getting rid of your negative national spirits. Like, I don't know if there's anything here that's going to help with the political dissent. Maybe that's investigating the traitors versus pardoning the collaborators. Like, what are we going to do? Are we going to hang all these people? Or are we going to bring them into the fold? Either way, we got to stop this fighting one way or the other. So that's probably what's going on there. All right, first thing is this is the tree for if you have either a democratic or authoritarian republic of Korea. So I get from what the Minor Monday report is saying, that whether it's an authoritarian or democratic regime that has puppeted Korea, Kim Koo, I hope I'm pronouncing all the names right, by the way, I'm probably not, is going to still be in charge at the beginning. So I don't know if that means if like a social democratic nation puppets them, they'll still have an authoritarian democratic leader. Like, is he just going to always be in charge of whatever party? I'm not entirely sure. We're going to obviously have to wait and see. But as you can see, it does split. Democratic principles on the right, on the left, authoritarianism on the right. You know, this must be military stuff that's going to be shared because you're going to be wanting to do that either way. Going to be interesting to see some of the details of this whenever it comes out. Like, for example, classless Korea over here under the maintenance of martial law. So maybe this is something where you still have the social hierarchy debuff until... I'm going to turn the music up a little bit. Maybe you still have that debuff until you get down here. Although there is a split. See, there's a split. After the split, you can either amend the Constitution or sponsor the Illuminist group, which we'll talk about later. And yeah, and then first election, is that going to open up a new thing? Or is it just like you're just going to have your election and maybe they figure, you're probably not going to have, by the time Korea's falling, it's maybe late game. So you're not going to need more than one election. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. But there's a few potential heads of state, and these are who I really want to talk about. A lot of interesting figures here. So here we have Ko Pyok-ok, who was somebody who, in real life, in our timeline, ran against the against President Syngman Rhee. So Syngman Rhee is a very notable president in South Korean history. He's the one who, I hope I'm remembering this right, he was president during the whole Korean War between the North and the South. So this guy, he was educated in the United States. Like, he went to high school there. He got his bachelor's degree there. He got his doctorate there. He spent pretty much, he spent 10 years in the United States away from Korea. But then when he eventually came back, he gets thrown in jail by the Japanese because he was a Korean nationalist. And so he's just rotting in prison forever. And then after the war, September 45, what a month in world history, yeah? Ends up founding the Korean Democratic Party, which is kind of like got a conservative bent to it. Also becomes the director of the Korean National Police. So he's really working closely with the Americans, and definitely not what you would call a left-wing candidate at all. However, in real life, he did end up coming at a conflict with the Korean National Police, which he was like the head of, because it wasn't with them. No, he was using them to arrest collaborators, but then he ended up getting in an argument with Rhee. So this was like 9 years before they ran against each other for president. There was a massacre in South Korea called the Jeochang Massacre, which allegedly was of communist collaborators. I'm not super familiar with the event, but it's my understanding that it was just like fear, that there wasn't any hard evidence that these civilians, and we're talking about like hundreds of civilians that were killed here, for allegedly collaborating with the North Korean communists. So there was a break after that. Fast forward to 1960, he runs for president, ends up getting cancer, and so he dies before the election. Still got, I think, like 10% of the vote, though, so whatever that means. All right, next up, we've got Jo So-ang, right? Hold on, I'm checking my notes here. Yeah, we got Jo So-ang. So this was another Korean, just kind of another Korean independence guy. Initially was somebody who wanted the two Koreas to unite, eventually slanted towards just South Korea. Ended up getting abducted away to it, and came up with like the three principles of equality, which in a way are like a parallel to the three principles of the people by Sun Yat-sen. So his three principles were that you needed political equality, economic equality, and educational equality in order to be successful. All right, next up, we've got Lee Won-hyung, and I'm going to try not to just talk about this guy all day, but he's. I was talking about Sun Yat-sen. This guy is basically the Korean Sun Yat-sen, where he's that kind of guy. You know, like nowadays you have the Kuomintang split. You have the Mao people. You had the not Sun Yat-sen, the Chiang Kai-shek. And then now you've got Taiwan and the People's Republic of China. But Sun Yat-sen is somebody who's kind of, revered, who's admired in both of those countries. That's kind of what Lee Won-hyung is, also known by his pen name Mong Yang, which stands for like Dream Son or something. Anyway, so he very actively cultivated relations with both the left and the right. Did join a communist party, And then when he was in Moscow, he met no less a couple of persons than Leon Trotsky and Vladimir Lenin. He ended up becoming a part of the Chinese Nationalist Party when Sun Yat-sen was running it. So there was this incident during the Berlin Olympics, which we here in the United States we learned about that through the context of Jesse Owens, but other stuff was going on there. There was a Korean runner who won the marathon that year, which is one of my favorite events, incidentally. And with the newspaper that Lou was the editor of at the time took a photograph of him, but took the Japanese flag off of his jersey in an act of protest. So his newspaper got shut down and he was arrested. God, there's just so much about this guy I want to talk about, but to make a long story short, he kind of was an extreme centrist, you might say, because obviously he was working with the communists, but he was also using far-right style nationalism and other things, trying to attempt to unite everybody. Didn't really work, and he ends up getting assassinated in 1947. All right, so yeah, so those are your potential Democratic leaders. Now, if you get an authoritarian nation instead that ends up in charge, specifically a national populist nation that ends up taking over Korea, you're going to get the Ilments, who were the ones with the hats that we saw earlier, which is like a sub-branch of authoritarianism. So these are radical Koreans who are not just nationalistic, but are interested in a mono-ethnic state. I think we all know where this is going. I'm taking a look at you, Iron Guard in Romania. So, we're going to have, everything's going to be egalitarian, everything's going to be classless, because everybody's going to be equal underneath beom-seok. So, beom-seok, actually, what does it have here? Maybe, well, I guess you can pause and read this, but another guy who had connections to Sun Yat-sen in real life was the actual first prime minister of South Korea, was a general in the Korean Liberation Army. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear those kids outside. Anyway, but wasn't actually able to spend much time in South Korea after the war. Ended up kind of spending most of the rest of his life, I think, in Taiwan, but then he was returned to be buried. Yeah, so the Lemonists, who advocate the one people principle for the Korean nation, they believe in revolutionizing and mobilizing Korea into a militarized mono-ethnic classic society with extreme veneration for Kim Koo, the figurehead of the nation. Yeah, so my bad, it's not under Lee, it's under Kim Koo, but you know who's really in charge. Guy had a strong jawline, though, you can't deny that. So if Qing China ends up liberating Korea, and the report specifies that it has to be Qing China, not the Zhili Republic, so Ku is still going to be there, but then they're going to go constitutional monarchy and recreate the Joseon Kingdom, and you'll have two potential new monarchs. First one is Yi-un, who was the final crown prince of Korea, actually served Japan during World War II as a general. I want to say he was the highest ranked ethnic Korean in there, but in any case, Japan was taking care of him. But after World War II, Korea didn't want him back. Said, you can't stay here. And so then he goes back to Japan. And then Japan writes into the Constitution measures that strip him of his Japanese titles. But yeah, that's kind of, I guess you could say, the main line of the family that could end up in charge. But over here is Yi Kang, or Kang. This was his older brother, fifth son of Emperor Gojong. But he was a member of he was a prince of the royal family, but via a concubine, which is one of the reasons why he was never made a crown prince, or the crown prince, I should say, even though he was earlier than a Yoon, who we just saw. So those are your yeah, gosh, this video's gone long enough already. I'll try to pick it up. So yeah, those are your two monarchs that you could potentially have. All right, next up. Let's say the Korean socialists are able to pop up. Anybody who is socialist and liberates Korea, except for the left Kuomintang, we'll talk about in a minute, will release a Korea that is led by this man, Park Hon-young. This is another guy who was really big into Korean independence, but unlike Liu, he's absolutely on the left. I believe one of the founders of the Korean Communist Party. Really, I need to learn more about Korean history as to why he did not end up becoming the leader of what's now North Korea, because he ended up staying in the south, but he did collaborate with Kim Il-sung during the Korean War, but not a lot really came of it, because the president of South Korea, Rhee, R-H-E-E, whoever it was, or however it's pronounced, I should say, was, massacring a lot of people in the South, saying he was suppressing dissent. Not sure how much of that was legitimate dissent, how much of that was, paranoia. But anyway, he nothing really comes of it. He is arrested and sentenced to death, but ultimately on charges of being an American spy, which is a little weird. But anyway, so that's going to be who's in charge, if anybody but the left Kuomintang liberates you, and so he's going to run the Korean Workers' Party. This is like totalitarianism, authoritarianism, the kind of like the vanguardism of France, the neo-socialism, and some of the totalists in Britain too. But if the left Kuomintang liberate Korea, they're going to liberate them under the Korean National Revolutionary Party, which is, like I said, the twin to the Kuomintang, and it'll be under Kim Won-bong, who I wanted to show this picture. This portrait is inaccurate, because when I looked him up, this was the picture that came. Noted Korean anarchist, communist, statesman, independence activist, and face of the brand of Hawa coffee, which I presume is a Korean coffee. But it's great that we were able to get a picture of him in color, and he had great hair, just he must have gone through shampoo like nobody's business. And you can pause and read the in-game bio, I guess. But I guess in this timeline, he got a haircut. All right. Next up, let's take a look at their tree. So yeah, Revolution Triumphant, political tutelage. This clearly is, you see the white sun here. This is the Kuomintang side. But then there's true Korean socialism. Purging, that's how you know it's totalist. Although the report does say, if the Kuomintang liberates, even if it's totalist Kuomintang, you're going to go down this tree still. Yeah, and then of course the army branch is united as per usual. Okay, and then this is the bigger tree. So here we go. Return to the provisional government into Korea. See, I don't know if you're going to have to do Korea Reborn before you can do some of the other stuff, but there you go. Land reform. Revolution Triumphant. So decent sized tree for a release country. Finally, there are a couple of generals here. New generals. And that's it. Okay, so I'm Conquering History Games. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please share it with people, tell people about it, subscribe so you'll know when the next one's going to come. If you really want to support the channel, I should be having memberships open soon. I'm waiting for YouTube to approve it. But yeah, I'm happy to be doing these again. And I'll see you in the next report. Bye.